One way of looking at it is this way. Now, this model is not specific to any curricular area or a specific subject area. The framework in itself, by Frey and Fisher, illustrates to you how the scaffold is released and who takes charge in the process of learning. So from the teacher, as the teacher moves from focused lesson to guided instruction and moves into collaborative learning and independent learning, the responsibility of learning shifts from the teacher to the child. Now, in any classroom, whether it's literacy or not, the goal is to develop independent learners, self-regulated learners who are here, who are supposed to be independent. It's not a buzzword. I know a lot of schools say, our students are self-regulated. Can you show us how self-regulation? So it's really integral also to the way you think of instructional planning, which means that if you move in the instructional sequence or in the lesson plan, teacher-directed towards student-directed, you're moving within the gradual release of responsibility instructional framework. Okay, that's the meaning of GRIF. Okay, so important is the modeling part. Okay, now, we move now to the during reading and after reading strategies. Okay. When the student is now reading, okay, aside from doing read alouds or think alouds, you have to remind them to, number one, we talked about this earlier, consider text organization. Number two, summarize the text. As they read, you might want to put stops in between or chunks between the long text and then start asking, okay, so far, based on what we have read so far, can you tell me what the general or the main idea is? Check your understanding. So you don't, kasi nga, iniiwan natin sila on their own. Hindi natin naisip, we also need to structure how they arrive or read complex text. But these are things that you need to be doing while they're reading. Checking for understanding. Okay, baka naman di pa nakakatapos, sa dami mo ng tanong. So pwede siguro yung first reading, sige, leave them on their own. Second reading, okay, let's go back to the text and let's see how well you understood. Okay. And then fix up strategies. Did you understand what you read? Well, let's try. Can you reread with your partner? Ano yung parts na hindi nyo naintindihan? Can you explain to each other? Okay. Maybe a bit noisy, but at least you're checking for understanding. Seek help from another person in the class. So, how should teachers facilitate the learning cycle? The art of questioning. Cannot get away from that. Teachers and students. We often forget that students should be allowed to ask questions about the text. We often think that questions always have to come from the teacher. No. Parang Jeopardy. Pwedeng. Ang sagot ay tanong. Diba sa Jeopardy, you don't answer with a fact. You answer with a question. So ask and answering questions is essential. We ask questions before, after, and during our reading. We ask questions to clarify meaning and further our understanding of text. We might not always find the answers to our questions, so we try to answer them ourselves. Now, what you can do is create, what we call these worksheets, di naman siya graphic organizer. Hindi naman siya, activities, activity sheets, no? You can ask them to write questions before they read, during reading, after reading, and so forth. Questions to help students make connections. Can you ask questions about the text related to what you already know? Are there questions that after you've read the text that you started asking because this is new to you? So forth. Questions related to the structure of the text genre. Now, in this case, it's text structure if it's informational text. What do you think was the was the writer or this article trying to do? Was it trying to describe, to compare and contrast, and so forth? Okay. Now, there are also what we call questions within the text. What has happened in the text so far? What is the main idea? Now, this is, in ELA, a given. Some of them we call inferential versus literal questions. It's really much more like the student works like a detective. So you're looking for clues, the purpose. But the important thing is read and rereading. Talang reading for meaning. Kasi some students now, parang pag sinabi, have you read it? You know for sure they've only read it once. That is not reading for understanding. Reading for understanding is if you don't understand, we were taught to review, go back until you get it. But them, their idea of reading is one go. No. You have to work like a detective. So if you look at close reading, there's first reading, getting the general idea first. By second reading, they have to dig a little deeper. By the third reading, they now have to put it all together. But the teacher has to explicitly say it. Okay, and I'll show you a video. Okay. Now, in close reading, as you noticed, what did she do? She made them, what was the first step? Okay, we call that annotating. Annotating the text. So, this one you can arrive at with your students, yung codes. Baka kasi sa English you have, di ba we have editing symbols? Yun. Pwede rin siguro para masanay. Pwede. So, yan. Highlighting, powerful circling, encircle, underline, so that you point out to them that there are important keywords or clues in the text that they will need to be able to understand it. Kasi typically when you ask them, oh sige, go, read. Turn to page 5 and start reading. There's really no idea students have no idea how to, ano ba to, hindi ko naintindihan. Right? But if the teacher is able to guide them through the process in close reading, then they stand a better chance. Okay, so there, you can just Google some of the codes. You can make it simpler, it's up to you. They can use Crayola. They can use, different colors. Okay. Now, the other thing we need to remember, moving out of reading, is that during reading and in post-reading strategies, the other important thing is to engage or extend the learning. And we now move to the reading-writing connection. So we now move to the reading-writing connection. Everybody, this is, commonsensical, but we always forget. And let's all read. 1. Reading should lead to writing.
Writing strategies should encourage further reading.
If they don't read, they won't be able to write. That's the thing. Kaya pag tinanggal nyo yung reading sa science text, lalong hindi na sila makakapagsulat. Yun yung problema. It compounds the problem. So, what are some sample writing prompts in science? Ito, typical ito sa mga textbooks, right? You find this? The Integrated Ocean Drilling Program hypothesized that drilling at the Atlantis Massif would allow scientists to collect rocks. Explain why scientists make hypotheses in your explanation, so forth. Physics. All across the country, state laws require drivers to wear seatbelts. Not everyone believes the use of seatbelts should be mandatory. What do you think? Make a case for or against mandatory seatbelt use, and so forth. So, usually, these come out in an exam. Totoo? Let's be honest. Sa exam lumalabas yan. Pero sa classroom teaching, minsan, pwedeng hindi. Kasi mahirap mag-check ng essay, yan, ng written output. Si English teacher lang yan, tsaka si Filipino yung tambak-tambak ang papel sa sa essay. Pero dapat, everyone in the school should have the responsibility for checking. Totoo yun. Kasi kung hindi consistent yung watch out for grammar and language, it's not going to happen. It's not going to be consistent. Now, one of the things Fisher and Frey said, students have to be taught how to write. Like reading, it has to be explicit. That's the sad part. It's also something that you teach. Because writing is thinking, if students are not writing fluently, they probably aren't thinking fluently. Agree? At least about the topic of study. Because if they cannot write about it, they probably don't have a clear idea of what it is. That's the sad part. Okay. Now, what are some strategies? I know that in some cases, yun nga, sabihin nyo, essay lang ba ng essay? No. There are also what we call writing strategies or writing prompts in science or informational text. We can have guided writing, learning logs, quick writes, structured note-taking, and listen, stop, and write. May handout ba ako nito? They didn't print this. Okay. So there are explicit or examples of different types of writing. Explanation, recounting, ito usually ginagamit. Explaining how, why, experimental reports, observational accounts, description, persuasion, argument, planning an experiment, drawing a conclusion, evaluation, description. Now, the question is, baka akala natin ang writing lang sa science, puro planning an experiment. Hindi. Pwedeng iba pa. Can come in other forms. Like these. Okay? You can call them activity sheets or something. So they don't necessarily have to write a story. They can be more structured. It's some sort of guided writing is also when teachers really sit with the students in writing. But in those opportunities that you don't have enough time or enough people to work in small groups, then the best we can do is provide structured writing activities.